In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about a potentially better way to handle diseases and other afflictions in D&D. This video is sponsored by my magazine SIDEQUEST, more on that later. Greetings gamers, my name's Anto and I'm the shady looking ruffian in the tavern, and today I want to talk to you about a recent one-shot that I ran and how I changed the process for implementing diseases and afflictions in D&D to, I think, be better and to get a better result. So one of my big problems with the concept of diseases in D&D is that usually as soon as a player is afflicted with something like a disease, they drop everything and they go to cure it. And that makes for a really difficult time in creating narrative tension using diseases and afflictions. It makes it really hard to create any drama in the story around diseases and afflictions, because if there's a cleric involved, they're probably going to cast some kind of restoration if you're high enough level, and if there's not a cleric involved, they're just going to drop everything and be like,
right, we're going to find someone to cure this thing.
So when I was recently putting together a one-shot that involved a lot of kind of contaminants and kind of disease themes, I wanted something that wouldn't make the players immediately drop everything they were doing and go and solve this problem. And what I came up with was really simple, but has turned out to be really effective. And that was to have your diseases give the players mechanical benefits before you start giving them penalties. It sounds like a really simple solution, but I found that it's been really effective. So in this one shot that I ran, the premise is there's a contagion in the city. There's something that's gotten into the water and it's contaminated the water with some kind of eldritch contamination that is causing all of the local people to start to get ill, to mutate, to become aberrant monsters. And I wanted the players to potentially be able to get this eldritch contamination, but I didn't want them to just get it and immediately be like,
oh, my stats have been decreased, we're just going to drop everything and go and sort this problem out.
I wanted them to live with it a little bit and for it to get some breathing room narratively, for there to be some effects from it, and for it to get a little bit more of a spotlight within the story, and for them to not just be like, oh, I've had a penalty to my stats, I'm just going to go and get this removed before we do anything else. Now, my thinking for this is, with a lot of real-world pathogens, they want to create an environment in their host that is beneficial to the spread and the reproduction of the pathogen. So they want to make it so that they will get more pathogen out there, you know? And I'm taking that thinking and applying it to these mechanics, thinking, well, if we give the players a benefit, first of all, it might make it so they don't go and try and get rid of it straight away. And that might mean that they can then be carriers, essentially. Now, with eldritch contamination, I broke it down into 6 stages, and I took a lot of inspiration from things like classic zombie movies and things kind of like rabies and a lot of those kind of afflictions, and based a lot of the early stages around that. So the first stage is a paranoia, and this paranoia makes the afflicted creature afraid that there's danger lurking around every corner. Mechanically, it just gives them a bonus to their initiative, gives them a +2 bonus to their initiative, and that is it, which is just a straight up gift to the players. If you're a player and your character suddenly has better initiative, that's great. Now, some players are going to know that things aren't always going to be good when you're afflicted with a cosmic radiation pathogen that's going to mutate your insides, and they're still going to want to go and get this problem solved. But there are some spicy players who are going to be like,
well, I've got one benefit from this. I'm going to ride this train and see how it goes.
That was my thinking, and that's exactly how it paid off. Stage 2 of the eldritch contamination is hyper-aggression, and this just gives you a flat bonus to your damage when you're making melee weapon attacks or unarmed strikes. So it just gives you straight up flat damage bonus. Again, a gift to the players. If your players are martial characters, if they're using any kind of weapons, if they're monks, they're just going to do more damage. The only people this doesn't really benefit are casters, but casters typically are more intelligent characters that are going to be like, I'm infected with an aberrant creation, I'm going to go and solve this problem. Stage 3 is called prismatic sickness. Now, this is a negative to the character, but it's not a negative to the player. So prismatic sickness means that once per day, the character is going to throw up. They're going to vomit this prismatic mucus that is contagious. They don't know when it's going to happen. You as the GM get that freedom to decide. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the player or their character. There's no provision in these rules that says when they throw up, they're debilitated or anything like that. That is there purely to give the GM that flexibility to be like, maybe you wake up in the morning and your character is being sick, and it's an indication to those around them that they are infected with this eldritch contamination. But if you want to get spicy with it, maybe in the middle of a combat, they might be sick on an enemy and infect the enemy. And there's a little bit of freedom there to do what you want as the GM to spice up your story with that. Now, all of that's to say, these themes of plague and infection and disease and things, especially post-COVID, are really things that you want to talk to your players about and make sure they're on board with. And stage 3, this prismatic sickness, puts a lot of trust in the GM to not abuse it, but this is the kind of thing that you want to be using in a group of trusted people, and you want to be mindful of your players and what they're feeling and make sure that they know that they can redirect things if they're uncomfortable with it. But it's not until stage 4 of the eldritch contamination that things really start getting bad for the players. So at this point, they've had 2 stages where it's just a benefit. One stage where they can spread the contagion, but it's not really a detriment to them. So hopefully, at this point, they should be not rushing off to go and get the problem solved. And then you hit them with the mental deterioration. That's when all of their mental stats, their intelligence, their wisdom and charisma, all drop by 2. And that's as the contamination begins to worm its way into their brain, affect their brain chemistry. And this is when the contamination is really starting to ramp up and the change is approaching. Chances are, if your players haven't sought some kind of cure by now, this is the point where it's going to start to happen. Unless they are a particularly spicy player. So in my campaign, I have introduced this. Several of the player characters became contaminated with the eldritch contagion, including the party rogue. And the party rogue has basically said, I don't use my brains anyway, so I'm happy to keep benefiting from my improved initiative and my improved damage, and I'll just take the hit to my mental stats. And they have fully knowingly continued to play while riddled with the eldritch contagion. And that's exactly the result that I wanted from this. I wanted to create a situation where the players were riding that line and not immediately going to get the problem solved. Then we go to stage 5 of the contamination, and that's when things start getting really, really bad, and that is incapacitation. So when your character hits stage 5, they will gain the incapacitated condition, and that's as this contagion is ravaging all of their internal organs, and they are right on the cusp of mutation, which is stage 6. And at stage 6, they're going to transform into a void creature, an eldritch aberration. They're going to transform into one of these mutants that they've probably encountered as part of the quest relating to this eldritch contamination. And there's a couple different options for what they can turn into. All of this is covered in issue 34 of SIDEQUEST, which is my monthly magazine, and that's today's sponsor. So this issue includes the eldritch contamination rules, so all 6 stages and how to run this in your game. But it also includes the Damn That's Nasty adventure, which is a short one-shot adventure for incorporating the eldritch contagion into your campaign, as well as a selection of new eldritch contamination monsters. So 7 new creatures built around the eldritch contamination mechanics. So these include the eldritch progenitor, which is a big boss level monster, which is the first monster that will arrive in an area and start spreading out the contagion. This is the creature that you really want to kill if you want to stop this problem from happening. You need their body as part of the ritual to create the potions to undo the contamination, and then a load of lesser void-based creatures that have a bunch of different special abilities tied to the contamination, and they can impart levels of contagion onto the players. And then the Eldritch Progenitor has a load of abilities that allow it to interact with player characters depending on how many levels of Eldritch contamination they have. So it has a legendary action which uses all 3 of its legendary actions, that if a player character has enough levels of Eldritch contamination, it can attempt to immediately transform them. So they make saving throws, and if they fail, the Eldritch Progenitor can transform them and cause them to mutate then and there. It's a really fun combination of mechanics with the adventure, the monsters, and the Eldritch contamination that you can mix and match and use in your games however you like. And I've been using this in my campaign over the last month or so, and I've really enjoyed using kind of a disease and affliction mechanic that the players haven't just immediately dealt with and moved on from. It's been a refreshing change of pace. I'd love to know what you think about all of this down in the comments below, how you would use it, and if all of that sounds good to you, check out this month's issue of SideQuest magazine using the link in the doobly-doo. And if you want to keep watching, check out this video I recently made where I made my own GM screen from scratch, crafting the whole thing, and it nearly drove me to madness. But until next time, happy gaming.